From Wana Brands, welcome to Enhance Your Life. I'm your host, Jonathan Small, and each week I talk to people from all sorts of professions and backgrounds about how cannabis has enhanced their lives and how this healing plant can enrich your life too. Hey everybody, welcome to the Enhance Your Life podcast. My name is John Small and I am your host, and I am delighted to bring you from Louisiana, from New Orleans, Louisiana, Dr. Chanda Macias, who is a true cannabis pioneer. After spending years in biomedical research and developing her knowledge of medical marijuana, in 2015, Dr. Chanda became the country's first Black woman medical cannabis operator as the CEO of Natural Holistic Healing Center, NHHC, which is a medical marijuana dispensary in Washington, D.C., with over 10,000 patients. Dr. Chanda is also the CEO of Alera Holistic Healthcare, where she helped make history, once again making history, twice in Louisiana with her partnership with Southern University, which became the first HBCU in the country to launch a hemp-based CBD and then a cannabis-based THC products. Dr. Chanda additionally serves as chairwoman of the board of managers and CEO for Women Grow, which empowers the next generation of women leaders in cannabis. They also have a great podcast called G Suite Conversations. And she, Dr. Chanda, is vice chair of the National Cannabis Roundtable Board, which is dedicated to promoting common sense federal legislation, tax equity, and financial services reform. Wow, you do a lot. I mean, how do you do a lot of things? This is a huge bio. Welcome to the show, Dr. Chanda.
Oh my goodness, it's such a pleasure to be here. And I mean, when I hear all that stuff that I'm doing, I wonder why I don't have time to breathe.
And by the way, I didn't even mention that you were a wife and a mother of four. So let's just.
Oh yeah, we can't forget the kids who calls you nonstop during your meetings and expect you to answer the phone.
Exactly. All right. So before we get into some of your advice and tips and stories, I'd love to find out a little bit about how you became so passionate about cannabis in your life.
You know, this story is so amazing to me because I've always been a healthcare advocate. And in undergraduate studies at Howard University, I went to my mentor and I was like, I want to understand how breast cancer works so I could cure it. And he said, okay, get in the lab. We're going to get you, equipped to understand the realities of biomedical research. And I studied the BRCA1 gene in breast cancer because I'm a woman. I wanted to help my community. Yeah. I wanted to find a healthcare solution. And then I saw the numbers in AfricanAmerican males with prostate cancer rise. So after I concluded my work in undergrad, I went on to graduate school and received my PhD in the work of prostate cancer metastasis to bone. Now, what was interesting in, my healthcare life and studying cancer is that the reoccurring theme of how cannabis actually treated the symptoms of cancer. So I was initially exposed to it and said, why aren't we using this as a healthcare treatment? And that's when I realized the issues with the war on drugs, the illegal nature of not being able to research cannabis for other reasons. And it was just that seed that was planted. And when you dedicate your life to healthcare, as a young scientist, it was really important. That's why I went to college. That's why I worked hard to earn my PhD. It was just my calling to try to find another healthcare solutions for patients that needed it.
Yeah. And growing up, did you have much exposure to cannabis? How did you know?
Well, I'm from the Black community. We didn't have healthcare. So anything that helped us, period, to feel better, our community engaged in that we could afford and had access to. So we did have access to cannabis in our community, and it was targeted, unfortunately. A lot of friends and family went to prison because of their healthcare usage of cannabis, but we dealt with mental health issues, cancer, diabetes, hypertension, and everything like any other person. But we didn't have health care because we didn't have really good jobs. We didn't have access to those great premium health care insurance programs. And so in order for us to feel better day to day as we take on our labor intensive jobs, that our community always used cannabis as a form of healthcare, but unfortunately we went to prison for it.
Yeah. So you are the first African-American woman to receive a medical marijuana license. That's quite an achievement. Since then, I don't know how many other Black women now have received them, but as the first, are you encouraged or concerned about the number of African-American women in the cannabis business now, like getting into the business? What's your feeling about that?
Well, you look statistically, and out of the whole schematic or layout of the cannabis industry, there are less than 4% of African Americans that are in the ownership position in cannabis. So then you put a woman on top of the African American statistics, and we're like little to none. And I just think if I break that statistic out and even look at how women are participating in this industry, we're still not that impactful in terms of our numbers, but I can tell you in terms of our resources, our knowledge, our expertise, the industry actually became what it is today because of those populations. And so it's really important for me to continue to ask our communities to come into the cannabis industry and participate in whatever realm that they feel that they can contribute. So if it's in operations, if it's in accounting, if it's in any aspect of the cannabis industry, we want you here. We want you to participate. And it is our mission and responsibility that we take care of the community that has raised us as well.
If there's an African-American woman listening to this podcast right now who wants to get into the industry, might not have the resources or the connections to break in, what would you suggest? Where would you suggest they start?
Where they are. So when I say start where you are, whatever job position you are in, whatever expertise you hold, just pivot that directly into the cannabis industry. It's not a very hard lift to build up your knowledge and your expertise in the field, but it is different from any other industry because we have regulations, we have compliances that we have to meet. But if you're, for example, in accounting, the one thing you really want to be able to know how it works is the 280E tax law. And that is what we need. It's more experts that can help us navigate in our industry. So there's ancillary businesses, there's plant touching businesses, but there is many aspects for you to enter the industry. And I think you just start exactly where you are, become an expert as it pertains to cannabis industry, and then continue to pivot your expertise.
Yeah, it's such good advice. And I also think, network, get out there, meet other people in the business. There's now that the world has opened up somewhat, there are many networking events, including Women Grow and organizations that can connect you with other entrepreneurs and other people in the cannabis industry, right? That can help, get you connected in some way.
Definitely. And I think that's what's so important about our networking platform, especially with Women Grow, is that, we gave birth to leaders in the industry now, and we just have to continue that narrative. Unfortunately, COVID has hit all type of events, but we're excited to be coming back live very soon and to really nurture those relationships with women and people who look like myself. Right. And that want to be a part of this industry in any aspect.
So part of your work is focused on something called strain ailment alignment. Tell us what that is.
So what's very interesting is that when I started to research the different strains and their cannabinoid profiles, what I realized is that different cannabinoids have an impact on different ailments and conditions. And what was really important is to align patients with the right strain. So when I think about ailment, what is your ailment? And alignment to the strain that you would need for your specific condition. And I think that sometimes people believe that to go into a cannabis dispensary and all cannabis is the same.
Mm.
No, there's different compositions in terms of cannabinoid profiles. We know there are over 140 cannabinoid profiles today. We also know that there's terpene profiles, meaning the essential oils that also have an impact on our health care that can help with the quality of life that you're looking. But it's a combination of those different molecules that actually lead to health.
Yeah.
And so understanding those underlying issues and education behind the medicine will help the patient in their line of recovery, whatever that looks like to them. Now, it's a very interesting dynamic what we've created, but also you'll see the patients that are aligned correctly with their medication. They know what they want every time they come in. They purchase it and they use it just like a medicine that you would get from a pharmacy. So I think that, as we continue to grow the cannabis industry, it's important that the one message that is constantly reiterated is that cannabis is truly medicine.
Yeah, it's truly medicine, and yet it's so widely misunderstood by the people who use it, and they kind of think of it as like one size fits all. And you are clearly saying that it is personal, and each person, for each ailment they might have, or each thing that they might be trying to fix or to assist with, might require a different formulation, different strain. How, if you're not a medical marijuana patient, and you're just using it recreationally, or would you suggest that even if you're using it recreationally, to maybe at first go and seek a medical marijuana dispensary, just so you can get an idea, get more educated on the plant? Because it's hard to get educated on the plant, I find.
Definitely. And that's why I started a series of videos on my website and social media handles, just so people can have the knowledge for themselves and make an informed decision on what medicine is best for them. So I think that whether it's adult use market that you're in, or if you're purchasing from the illicit market or what people call the gray market, it is important you understand what kind of medicine you're using. I know that a lot of times when I talk to patients, they're always saying, oh, I'm looking for like a Durban poison, for example. And I tried that 10 years ago and it changed my life. I want Durban poison again. Does anyone have it? Now, the real issue with that, Jonathan, is that the fact that they really want that medicine profile that came with that strain, and it helped them in some way. So they're trying to repeat that. The issue with the illicit market or in a gray market is that usually you can't get those same strains. You have to get what is available. So having a relationship with a medical facility can give you some of that continuity that you might be looking for, and especially if you're looking for a specific result over the same result over a period of time. And I think that is one of the differentiating factors in the cannabis industry right now, is that finding the medicine that works for you, making sure you have access to it continuously when you need it, and making sure it's safe. We want it tested. We want it so that it has lack of impurities and anything that can be harmful to the body.
Yeah, amen to that. How are you? Another big issue for you is advocating for increased patient access to marijuana, right? Not enough people have access to it. Tell us about that journey and what you're doing.
The journey it's a long and continuous journey. I know in DC right now, thank God, we were able to get patient access for self-certification. So now that you don't need a doctor recommendation, you can literally go into the dispensary, sign up for the program, and self-certify what your ailment and condition is, and receive a card and be able to participate.
Oh, wow. So you don't need a doctor to get a card in DC?
No, no
Okay.
longer. We were able to change that. But it started where we only had a handful of conditions, maybe 10, to any condition, any ailment, and now giving access to larger quantities of medicine to those that will really need it. And what's interesting is that evolution, whether it's opening up more access through dispensaries or changing laws, which we have done here, we just were able to, starting August 1st, 2020.
And this is here being in Louisiana.
In Louisiana, as well as DC, we have reciprocity. And what that means is if you have a cannabis card from any state, 37 states, that you can come to Louisiana or Washington, D.C. to purchase medicine.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So, yeah, this is what it's all about. Patients that when they travel, they don't have to be held, hostage to trying to sneak medicine into the state, that they can come here and purchase safely. They're under the guidelines of the state. They're in compliance. I've had parents say that my child has epilepsy. They can't visit their dying grandma in Washington, D.C. because they can't bring medicine over those state lines. But now you can purchase there. So again, making common sense policies for the patients is just as important than any other aspect of cannabis. And what I've seen is the MSOs definitely focus on what are the good business practices to instill. But for me, it's important that if you are a government worker, a state worker, and an employee, that you have access to healthcare as in cannabis healthcare, just like everyone else. Healthcare is a civil right.
Mm-hmm.
We have the right to choose what can help us in our bodies and what makes us feel better based upon our conditions. And this is where we stand, and we have to continue to fight for patients that cannot fight for themselves.
And you spend a lot of time in that fight. You're even involved in Washington on a political level. The National Cannabis Roundtable is basically a lobbying group. I guess lobbies always has a negative connotation, but it is a lobbying group. Can you tell us kind of from where you sit, where are we as far as like legalization? There's so many issues that cannabis is up against, so many challenges, but one is the idea of national legalization. Do you think is that something that's even in your window, or is that not even the fight that you're trying to make right now because that's so far in the distance? Because there's so many other issues like we've been talking about as far as getting access to cannabis right now.
Well, what's important for myself and my own philosophy is the seeds that have to be laid. Mm-hmm. And I told you when I started off in this, I understood that in cancer research that cannabis had a true benefit for patients. And so about 2 months ago, I had a visit with the White House. I was gracious that they would hear my narrative as I represent millions of patients that want to have access, and talk to them about what are the necessary steps towards legalization so patients have the access they need to the medicine that works for them. And it was an interesting conversation, but it planted the seed. Mm-hmm. And my job here is, again, to focus on what's best for the patient. And I know that 2 weeks later, 75 patients that were actually had been incarcerated federally were released and pardoned for their crimes. Can I say that directly came from the conversations I had? No, but what I can say is that I definitely had an impact on some of those conversations that might have been had. And that's my responsibility. I support our Congressman Troy Carter of Louisiana that has introduced a bill 2 weeks. No, it's actually been 3 weeks ago now. It's called the Climb Act to give small businesses, especially minorities and those that are disabled and other protected classes, access to funding sources so that they can participate in the industry. So again, am I, supporting those that support us? Absolutely. And I am empowering those that are willing to empower us. It's not an easy journey, but we have to start somewhere. And those seeds that we're planting today, we hope that they come to fruition one day, changing the landscape of healthcare throughout this nation.
All right. You just said that you went to the White House 2 months. You just let it drop. Oh, I went to the White House 2 months ago. I'm like, what? Wait, hold on. So did you meet with the president?
No, I met with his senior advisor.
Okay.
And it was very scary and interesting.
Were you alone, or was it your group of you?
So Weldon Angelo is also in cannabis reform. He was pardoned for his crimes that they said that were committed by him out of the West Coast, over a decade ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he is an example of someone that should be celebrated on changing the laws, the hearts of minds of politicians. And it was interesting because when we went through security check, they were like, there's some of you that have federal crimes. And we're like,
that's the point.
We've been pardoned.
Yeah. And that's kind of the point.
Like, that's the whole point of the conversation.
Exactly. We shouldn't be. Yeah.
And it was a little nerve-wracking because, that's the epitome of government for us. That's what we're trying to have an impact on. And we stood our ground. We made ourselves accessible for the administration. We made suggestions on how we can help and continue to unravel this big conglomerate of policies that prevent legalization. And we just will continue to have those narratives with them and are pushing it in other ways. And when I say pushing legalization in other ways where we could have a direct impact. So for me, it is legalization is a form of freedom. Freedom for my son, if he ever had to use cannabis in the future, that he wouldn't go to prison for it. And I've had many mothers that have lost their children for giving cannabis to their children, especially those with epilepsy and autism. So for me, I'm fighting for those that don't have other options. Cannabis is the only option for them. And you can't put a policy between a mother and a child.
Yeah.
We're not built that way. And
No way.
It's really important that someone fights for our community. And that's what the community has chosen me to have the voice. And I will use it as long as I have the platform and the life inside of me to do it.
Well, you are just the perfect person to do it, given your experience and breadth of knowledge. When you went to the White House, did you sense first of all, who set up that meeting? Did you set it up?
The National Cannabis Roundtable.
Okay, they set it up.
We set it up collectively because I'm a founding member and has always been, a directive in how we look and help cannabis reform. We decided that this was an important step just to plant the seed. So,
did you sense an openness with that official that you met with?
Yes, Cedric Richmond, the former senior advisor to President Biden.
Yeah, that's he's a former, so he's not there anymore?
He's there no longer. He's working with the DNC to push some really, I would say, narratives for the Democratic Party for this upcoming election. But I'm working with his staff, his former staff, keeping these narratives going. So
the narrative is still going. Yeah, because I think we hear, the sort of conventional wisdom about the Biden administration is that it's a little bit old school, and he comes from a different generation and has a different view of cannabis maybe than kind of informed by the sort of myths and stereotypes of the old days, the reefer madness kind of stuff. But you it's encouraging that you sense an openness in his administration for change.
The other thing is that it's just not him.
Yeah.
A lot of us come from that old school way of thinking. That's how we were conditioned in the 80s to say no to drugs.
Yep.
And it wasn't until your loved one or yourself suffered from an ailment and a condition and you're like, cannabis works, why aren't we using it? And that's when you start to see people opening up their minds and saying, well, maybe we were lied to. Maybe we should look at this differently. And I can imagine, I have to be empathetic that, if you had a child that suffered from any type of addiction, that you definitely want to be a little bit more concerned about any type of medical drug reform, period, just to prevent that from happening to anyone else's child. But you have to also be open to the research that is happening currently, saying that what cannabis looks as an exit to pharmaceutical drugs and an entrance to healthcare. And I think that that comes with a lot of education. And that education right now is taking a back burner, just not in the executive office, but legislatively, because of still dealing with COVID issues, dealing with the Ukraine, dealing with Roe versus Wade. A lot of issues,
yeah.
We just tend to fall behind all the immediate needs, but that's why we have to have leaders in our community that keep pushing that narrative ahead, despite
at a local level. Yeah.
What's going on.
Yeah. All right. Last two questions. One is, how do you use, or do you use CBD or cannabis in your own life?
Yeah, definitely. So anti-inflammatory is really good. I have a bad case of psoriasis because of my just nerves, anxiety, stress, etc.
Yeah.
And so what I can tell you is that there's some really great cannabis brands for psoriasis, eczema, and it just helps with the healing process. And I think a lot of people don't understand like the many applications that cannabis has, because not all cannabis flowers are equal. They're different for different conditions. And what's important for me is to really push that narrative that this medicine can be used to treat and help many symptoms of many different ailments if given the opportunity to have the clinical research done here in the United States in an open forum, not just specific to certain universities or specific laboratories, but it's time for us to open it up so research can happen overall, so we can push the narrative of cannabis as medicine.
Well, I don't even have a second question because that was a good answer to the first one. Dr. Shonda, this has been so great as usual. You're such a great interview, such a great pioneer for the plant, and thank you so much for all you do. And here's to continued success.
You're just a blessing, and thank you for really sharing this narrative across the United States and global communities. And thank you for believing it to bring it to fruition, because if it wasn't for you, our voices wouldn't be heard. So I'm grateful, and just be blessed, and thank you for all you do.
Enhance Your Life is brought to you by Wana, the #1 infused product in North America. Wana's entire process is designed to deliver the same great experience time after time. They have spent years fine-tuning their recipes so that their products are delicious, consistent, and potent. For more information, head on over to wanabrands.com. That's Wana, W-A-N-A, brands.com.